Before we continue, though, we have to understand who who uses financial statements and also who prepares financial statements. The reason why we have financial statements is that people really need financial statements in order to make decisions. And some of those people who need them are managers and employees. Managers and employees need information in order to make decisions. Remember that they're going to do the planning. They're going to make the basic decisions about how the company should run. And so they need information in order to make those decisions. Investment analysts, and that's going to really be us in this situation, need information because they need to be able to predict the future performance. That's step 3. They need to predict the future performance so that they can do projections, step 4, and therefore value the stock. They also need the information in order to estimate future performance and determine if a company is a good credit risk or not. Now, those would be creditors. Creditors need to be able to look at the financial statements and make a determination. Is this company going to be able to pay us back or not? And if they can't pay us back, then we're not going to loan them any more money. Stockholders need it in order to assess whether or not their investment decisions are good decisions or not. In other words, should we keep the money in this company or not? Should we invest in the company? Should we not invest in the company? Buy, sell, or hold, or the so-called expressions. And customers usually want to look at this information to make sure that the companies that they're dealing with are profitable and they're going to be able to support their contracts. So, for example, if you are thinking about entering into an agreement with a company to supply you, and they're going to be you're entering into a contract, let's say a supply contract, so they're going to supply raw materials to your factory for the next 5 years. You'd want to look at their financial statements to make sure that this company is solvent and they're going to be able to see through that contract over that time period. Regulators, of course, that government wants to see financial statements primarily to make sure that the company is paying the right amount of taxes. But also they may want to see it for other purposes such as antitrust assessments, and of course Securities and Exchange Commission is going to want to make sure that the information the company has provided is accurate and reliable for investors to use. And finally, voters, for purposes of understanding what companies are doing. But what's really key here are the top 3. Managers and employees, investment analysts, and creditors, because they're going to be using this information to make decisions, and those decisions are going to drive the company's performance and also what's going on in the stock market. Now, where does this information come from? Information is provided in the United States primarily in 2 different forms, what's called the 10K and the 10Q. And these are Securities and Exchange Commission forms that companies file. And the 10K is an annual form that includes audited financial statements with notes, management discussion and analysis, and all sorts of other disclosures that companies are required to provide. The 10Q is provided for the first 3 quarters of the year, and that includes unaudited financial statements that sort of provide an update. So 10Q information tends to be a little less reliable than the 10K because it's not audited. However, it provides investors with more timely information. This way they get information more than once a year to tell them what's going on. So this is the primary source of information that companies are going to have. There's a lot of other sources. We'll be talking about them throughout the course. So the accounting information is shown to be useful because it helps investors and all kinds of stakeholders to make decisions. The more information that people have to make decisions, the better decisions that they're able to make. If we lived in an environment where there was no accounting information, then investors would not know where to invest their money, and therefore they wouldn't be able to invest it at all. If you didn't know how a company was performing, then you certainly wouldn't want to invest in that company. That said, if there was poor information, and we see this sometimes when there's an accounting fraud. When there's an accounting fraud, people take their money out because the information they had turns out not to be reliable. And therefore, if the information is they have information but it's not reliable, they still would not want to invest in a company because they really don't know what they're getting for their money. It's kind of like, there's something there, but we don't really know what, and a lot of it might not actually exist. So quality disclosure benefits investors, but because it benefits investors, it also benefits companies. If a company provides reliable information, investors can make better decisions, and that allows people to actually invest in the company. So disclosing information is key to corporate performance and good performance. And again, good reliable information means that a company is going to be able to sell stock, it's going to be able to issue debt, it's going to be able to do all the other things that they need to do in order to operate well. Now that said, information doesn't come free. And it costs a lot of money to prepare information. And oftentimes it means disclosing information that says bad things about your company. And that's just reality. So for example, if your company is getting sued, you have to provide that information, and it makes you look bad, and it may turn off some investors. However, the cost of not providing that information is even worse, because then investors don't have reliable information and they can't make the decisions that they need to make. So a lot of times disclosing information entails some danger and cost. And it's not just the fact that you have to pay accountants a lot of money, but it's also the fact that you may say things that provide competitive disadvantage. I was just reading in the Wall Street Journal the other day, LaCroix water will not tell you what's in their water. That there are secret ingredients there they don't want anyone to know. Investors are saying, well, we want to know. And the company's saying, well, if people knew what was in our water and makes it taste so good, then that would create information would get out to our competitors, and they would come out with similar products. Similarly, companies may sometimes disclose things that could lead to lawsuits. So they may say, for example, let's say there was an accounting fraud or there was some kind of financial fraud. And if the company releases it, then investors may sue them. Well, you know what? That's information that investors need to know. They own your company, so they're entitled to know what's going on. Similarly, political costs. For example, let's say we had the example of Exxon Valdez. It was, if you're not familiar with it, it was a huge oil spill off the coast of Alaska. And at the time, Exxon was very profitable. And releasing high profits made the company look really bad because they were getting sued. And the more profits they're making, the more damages they were likely to have to pay because of this huge oil spill. So disclosing good information entails certain costs. And that's understood, and it leads to a lot of companies hesitating to release good information. The SEC has something called Regulation FD. And what Regulation FD says that you can't provide information to some people without providing it to everybody. So people who are within the company and have access to information that is private are not allowed to disclose information to the outside. You can't tell your brother-in-law about your company's great new acquisition or anything like that. That's all considered confidential, and it's actually illegal to disclose that information, and it's really illegal to trade stocks on that information. But there's also, the basic rule is that the company cannot disclose information selectively to only some people without disclosing it to everybody. So what that means is that when a company discloses information, today they would disclose it on the internet and it becomes available to everybody at the same time. If an analyst calls the company and asks them a question about the financial statements, they can't necessarily answer it in private. They have to release the information to the whole world and not just to a few people. So that's Regulation FD. Now you're probably wondering, how did they do this before the internet? Before the internet, it was done with conference calls. But by the time Regulation Fair Disclosure came out, That was actually after the internet was already up and running. But previously there were problems because some people had information before other people, and the people who had the information first could take advantage of it in trading the stock. Now, international accounting standards, most countries in the world, almost all countries in the world now use international accounting standards. The United States is not one of them. But oftentimes you may be interested in investing in companies that are outside the United States, and they're going to use international accounting standards. They can use international standards. Foreign companies can use international standards in the United States, but American companies continue to use GAAP. International standards come from the IASB, International Accounting Standards Board, and the system is called IFRS, International Financial Reporting Standards. Now, there is a goal to eventually unite the two so that United States GAAP is consistent with international standards, but there's no prospect of that happening anytime soon. So the United States, for the foreseeable future, will be using different standards from the rest of the world. There's a lot of cooperation going on, but the likelihood of the United States actually following international standards anytime soon is pretty low. Next, we're going to talk about financial